The first step of making a bowl is to lay out your circle. If you're dealing with a square piece of material, you can go corner to corner and create an X to find the center. Once you have the center, I like to draw the circle with dividers, so that means I need to center punch the middle where the X overlaps. So I'll go ahead and center punch it and then use a pair of dividers to draw my circle. I like using dividers over a compass because dividers are they'll give you a scratched line, which is more accurate than a pencil line. It also won't rub off as you're cutting your circle, so you don't have to worry about it disappearing. All right, this is a deep throat saw, which makes cutting a larger circle a little bit easier. We do have one in the studio in the tool crib, so we'll have one if you need one. Now, you can either cut your circle by hand, which actually gets you pretty close to the line. You don't really have much filing to do. Or you can use what they call a beverly shear. And that's a shear that allows you to cut circles. I'm usually at home and don't own a beverly shear, so most of the time when I make vessels, I cut mine out by hand. Now, after you cut yours out, you'll need to file your edge. Notice how I'm cutting with the curve. So I'm going parallel to the edge. I'm not filing perpendicular like this. You don't want to do that. That's a no-no. With the curve. Okay, now this is a beverly shear. What it does is it allows the material that you're trimming away to kind of go underneath the arm of the shear. All right, so it'll allow that, and that allows you to cut a curved line because the material is able to go kind of scoot underneath the underside of the blade. It's a little harder to control than a saw, obviously, but it gets you pretty close to the line. Normally when I use the beverly shear, I don't file up to the edge because usually there's a fair amount of material there. I'll use either a disc sander or a belt sander. The belt sander gives you a little bit more control, so I would recommend using that. Sometimes the disc sander can be too aggressive. And you can see here, I'm just resting my material on the platen of the machine and letting the belt nibble away up to the line, nice and slowly. Now this will give you lines going perpendicular to the edge, so that, again, I'll file off those sanded lines because you want your lines to be going parallel with your edge, so it's less likely to crack as you form your material. Your next step will be annealing. We do have a larger annealing torch located in the studio. You can see here I'm turning on the valves for both the gas and the air. Now these knobs, that's the gas and that is the air. They'll turn from, if they're perpendicular to the line, they're off. So I've just cracked that down a little bit. I've lit my gas and now I'll slowly add my air. It's a little bit larger of a torch, so it can be a little bit intimidating. But once you get used to it, it does heat up your metal a lot faster than the smaller Smith's torch. But you know, if this is intimidating, go ahead and use the smaller Smith torch. You can even use a couple torches on a vessel if you want, which will heat it up a little bit faster. So you fully heat it and quench it, pickle and dry, and then we'll be at the forming stage. We use divots like this in the stumps. These are actually they don't have to be quite as deep. That one there used to be my favorite one, but a big chunk of it got knocked out. So now I use these for bowls. They're a little bit shallower. If you want to go deeper, sink them in here first and then go to those deeper ones. All right. So when we're sinking, we're going to sort of support the metal on the edge of that divot, and we're going to hammer in a consistent fashion. We're going to start on the outside edge and work our way in. We can use either what they call a blocking hammer like this, or we could actually use a mushroom stake, which I prefer to use. We're going to use it like a hammer, where we're just going to kind of pound it into that negative space. Again, we'll support the edge of the work on the edge of the divot and then hammer pretty close to the edge, but again, working from the outside in towards the middle. And you can see here I'm trying to turn the material and strike it at a really consistent, with a consistent amount of force. And as I'm doing this, I'll probably go once or twice around the entire disc, and then I'll start moving in towards the middle. So I've gone once, and you can kind of see it's starting to form, but sometimes it's a little uneven. So if you go around, 2, sometimes even 3 times, it makes your edge a little bit more even, so it's not as wobbly, I guess you could call it. And so you can again see here, this is the second time around, and now I'm going to start going more in towards the middle. So I'm striking in the same spot on the stump, and I'm turning the piece with my left hand. I'm right hand dominant, so reverse that if you're left-handed. And again, I like the mushroom stake technique, but this can be done with a rounded hammer, either an embossing hammer or a blocking hammer like the one I showed you earlier. Now, as you get towards the middle, you can kind of lighten up a little bit on your hammer blow so it doesn't take as much force to form it. Now, we've sort of maxed out on how far we can push that material, so we'll anneal it, quench it, and pickle it again. And then we can go another round of forming with the stake if we want to go deeper. If I want to go a lot deeper, I would use a slightly more domed divot in the stump. But I want this to be a shallow bowl, so I want it to be a little bit deeper, but I'm going to use that same divot I just used. All right. So after we get it roughed out, we want to sort of refine the shape of that bowl, and we're gonna use a plastic mallet on a stake. This stake fits the bowl pretty well. All right, so this is the stake we'll use to what they call, we'll clean it up with a plastic mallet, and that's called bouging, which is a French term. It just means smoothing out the surface. And so we'll use this stake to do that, and a plastic mallet. And we'll just, you'll see me here, I'll sort of tap the curve and move the piece a little bit, just trying to refine that shape. And this is if you have a lot of lumps and bumps. So once I go through the whole vessel, I'll then concentrate on that edge just to make sure the edge doesn't look wobbly, and make sure it's nice and round. And so I'll find a spot on the stake where the edge matches really well, and I'll just sort of turn it and hammer it again, trying to keep a consistent force to my hammer blows and turn it at a consistent rate. And then I'm starting with a bowl that's pretty close to the shape that I want. Now we're going to go and planish the bowl. You can see here with a compass, I'm starting to draw concentric lines, depending on the size of the bowl, probably 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch apart. And they're just guidelines to help you planish in a sort of systematic way. Remember ear protections when you start to planish. All right, and what I'll be doing is I'll cover this center part, and then you'll see, as I'm demonstrating with the pencil, I'll sort of hammer outward and inward, so almost in a W-type pattern. So I'm going to hammer the next space, but then kind of blend it with what I had just planished. You do want to make sure you're using a mirror finished hammer. I'm going to use the curved side because I want to see my hammer blows a little bit more. I want to see that nice hammer peen finish. If you want it to be more of a polished finish, you could use the flat side of the hammer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to planish sort of the middle of the vessel. We're going to start from the middle and work our way out. I'll probably planish the size, like a round area, or the size of $1 or $1/2. Once I get that central part planished, what I'll do is I'll show you a technique where you can kind of make an X on your vessel. So I'll start from the center and planish a line that works out to the edge, and then I'll go in the other direction. I'll basically make an X across the form, and that will work hard on the material, so it keeps its shape while I'm planishing it. After you get used to planishing, like when I'm working on vessels, I don't do that step anymore. But if this is your first bowl that you're planishing, it can help kind of keep the shape of the bowl. All right, and you can see here I've planished an area about the size of a $50, and the steak that I'm planishing on it. See how I'm flipping it over, and you can see how shiny that is. So the steak is planishing the inside while you're planishing the outside. So the steak's smoothing out the interior while you're smoothing out the exterior. And now you can kind of see I'm planishing a line out towards the edge. I'm going to put that X I just told you about. See how I planished a little bit of line, and then I'll go the other direction. We'll speed things up here so you're not waiting around. All right, and you can kind of see how I'm planishing that X across the surface, right? And that'll, again, just work hard. You could even put lines in between the X, which isn't a bad idea. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and planish the vessel. We're going to, again, planish that unplanished area, but then blend it up into the area we just planished, and so what I'll do is I'll hammer and fill in that space, and then kind of hammer up into what I just hammered, and that helps blend things so you don't end up with facets on your bowl. All right, and you can kind of watch how the hammer, like I'll planish down and then planish back into what I had previously planished, and it's all a smoothing and blending process. We're really going for a consistent curve. And again, we'll start in the middle of the vessel, and then we'll sort of slowly work our way. I usually cover, anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch per round, I guess you would call it. And take your time with this. Planishing is really a skill that takes practice and time to perfect. And remember, the act of planishing, you're actually pinching the metal, so you're making direct steak contact. So your hammer, you're not closing up airspace. You want a really solid, and this is something that you can hear. You could also feel. So if you're not making contact with your steak, you're not planishing right. And as you work towards the edge, when you get to your very edge, you want to, again, lighten up a lot on your hammer blows so you're not distorting the edge. If you hit close to the edge too hard, it'll displace the metal, and you end up with a little bit of a wavy edge. Once you get the whole thing planished, you do want to take a look at your edge. One thing I like to do to the edge, if it's wavy, file it. Mine's pretty decent, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer back on my edge a little bit with a planishing hammer. You could also do it with, if you want a textured edge, you could do it with a hammer that comes to a sharp edge, and you could hammer back on it. And what this is going to do is going to thicken up your edge a little bit. And I'm doing this on a sandbag, so I'm just supporting it with a sandbag and hammering my edge, and that'll just give the edge a little bit more of a substantial look. Sort of activate that edge a little bit. So I'm pushing the material back on itself, so it looks it looks visually thicker than it is. You can kind of see here in the close-up how the edge on the left is a little bit thicker than the other side. And I'll just take my time and work my way around the vessel. If you're hammering it too hard, you could distort your edge, and if you do distort it, just put it back up on your mushroom steak and hammer it flat. And see how that looks, it sort of dresses up your edge a little bit.